Hey babes, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Brandy. I am the host of the Be Real Babe Show, a spinoff of the Be Real Babe podcast. And today, you guys, it is internet insanity time. And boy, oh boy, do I have an insane story for you. Now, this story went viral over the summertime. So, obviously, because I took the break, I'm a little bit behind. However, the main topic of this situation, her name is Kendra. And in the last episode, one of the main topics was Kendra. So, I felt it was kind of appropriate because, it seems like it's maybe not a good month to be a Kendra. And I kind of just wanted to go over the story that blew up over the summer. It settled down a little bit. Like I said, I was kind of going back and forth in the last episode about talking about this because a lot of people were saying that this woman was going through a psychosis or she was kind of having some sort of mental health break. But she has posted on TikTok that she, in fact, isn't. She's doing amazing. She was just sharing her story. So I feel like that's fair to then continue to talk about the story. Now I'm going to try and be as kind as possible because I don't think that anybody deserves any hate or harm or anything like that. But I do think that there are some takeaways of this story that, perhaps could land with some people or maybe a nugget for the future and kind of cautionary tale about AI. So this story is about one woman named Kendra who fell in love with her psychiatrist, and she claims that he did absolutely nothing to stop it. If anything, he kept her around for years to fulfill a sick fantasy. So if you're interested in listening to that, or at least listening to my take on this situation, stick around and we'll jump right in. Okay, you guys, I this I went back and forth on this story so many times, but as I was watching more and more, I do want to cover this. I do want to talk about this story just because there's some things that I think are a little bit concerning on both ends of the spectrum here, and just kind of about TikTok and people's stories and the virality of it and the dangers that it can cause. So, like I mentioned, this story is about a woman who went viral in the summertime. I believe it was the beginning of August that this um, caught speed. I'm not exactly sure when she posted, but that's kind of when it came on my radar. And basically, all the headlines, everything is just saying, she fell in love with her psychiatrist, and her psychiatrist used his knowledge and his education surrounding, her vulnerabilities to exploit her and groom her, and what she says, quote unquote, fill his supply. And I just thought this was a really interesting story because not only does it involve going on social media and telling a story and and going viral and kind of having to deal with the mental health aspect of that. There's AI stuff. There's potential people were talking about AI psychosis. There's just a lot of, I believe, misunderstanding and misinterpretation. And there's a lot of questions of like, did this even happen? Um, I'm not trying to say that these stories aren't valid and I can only watch so much. So maybe sound off in the comments if I've missed something while I explain what I read of this story or what I understood. So please let me know. But I think this chalks up to a lot of misunderstanding, and I just find it a little disingenuous to bring it online. Now, I understand wanting to learn stuff about your situation. I understand sharing your story, but I think this story could have been told perhaps while saving the identity of this individual, which is now he's obviously all over social media. People have been doxing him, and that's just horrible. And what are the repercussions of doing this, right? And so a bunch of elements of this story, but let's dial back to the beginning. And again, this is just strictly from my opinion, from my understanding of watching hundreds of hours, I feel like at this point, where I just feel numbed out with information. So this all starts when this individual Kendra decided, and again, you guys can go on this app. You're on this app. You can just put in Kendra falls in love with her psychiatrist, and you will find so many deep dives from psychiatrists that are talking about it, from medical professionals, from people. Just content creators, drama creators, all those kind of things. You can find lots on there. So I highly suggest if you're looking for a longer form, especially from psychiatrist points of view, definitely go have a look. But if you want to stick around and listen to my unhinged thoughts about it, please do. So like I said, she decided to go back on ADHD meds after being off of them from her 20s. So they didn't. She said that the benefits of them didn't outweigh, which completely understand. I did not believe that the benefits outweighed the risks for me personally, and I haven't been on anxiety medication for, gosh, far probably like 6, 7 years, and best decision I ever made. So I completely understand that. And obviously, with medication, it's everyone's, as long as they're informed, do what you will. But I know a lot of people, and I think it's the best way, use it for a tool for a certain time, and then get off of them, especially if they do come with risks that, concern you. If you need it for a time to help you through a difficult time, or if you are someone that's diagnosed that needs something, like as long as people know the risks, I think people know my qualms with big pharma, but I also do understand that people need it. I just, I also think that it can be used as a tool for just some difficult times with some people. So sounds like that's where Kendra kind of was, until she started reading. She started reading the Taking Charge of Adult ADHD, and her takeaway was that she needs to be on meds. So she Googled, and she was obviously feeling the need to in her life, and then found that, and it aligned with her. So she decided to find a psychiatrist in her area, and she booked a appointment. So then she had her initial 90-minute intake, and this was all on Zoom. I believe this was in 2022 or 2021. I didn't quite have the date. Sorry, these are all my notes from just watching the videos. I didn't catch the initial date, but I believe it was about 2021. So it would have been like height of COVID. So everything was on Zoom. And she said that the first thing that she noticed when she went into this meeting and this intake was that he was her age and that he was attractive. Um, she said also that she had a lot of couch time, so she felt very comfortable. She just jumped right in, kind of dumped everything, and having an understanding, I'm assuming, of what those appointments are like. She just went full in, explained all of her childhood trauma, all of her issues. I guess she alleges that she has daddy issues. She also let him know that she was 6 months sober, but shared her substance abuse and said, and what I find interesting is that she always said that he pretended to listen and pretended to care, but wasn't actually. And then she will contradict herself and say that he was amazing at listening and was really good at his job. So take that with a grain of salt. But I guess, yeah, you get your first intake. And, I think, and she does say she takes accountability, but in this circumstance, when I'm watching and retelling it, maybe in that moment that you thought he was attractive, I think maybe to have avoided all of this, that maybe you should have put up that boundary and not carried on. You know what I mean? Like, not trying to be this way, but I think that's a red flag number one that was perhaps missed, is that, if immediately you see him, you think he's attractive and he's my age. What are you thinking? That immediately you might want to be with him? Maybe it might not be the best. Like, maybe do your intake and then go, hey, you know what? I actually do like this guy. I'm going to go to somebody else for the rest of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you didn't sought out this psychiatrist because of his like certificates or what he's done or something that you've seen on social media or something like that, I don't understand why in that moment you couldn't have, not quote unquote victim blaming here, but like at that moment, I think maybe would have been a good red flag. So maybe red flag for other people if you immediately have an interest, if something sparks, it's not uncommon for people to like their therapist, their friends, if they listen. It's not uncommon, and we'll get into this a little bit about transference and people that, have feelings for their therapists or counselors because they're caring for them, or any medical professionals because they're feeling cared for. So I think, and not knowing that, of course, you didn't know that, but I think to me, for people now listening, that's a red flag. If you immediately go in there and you're like, oh, damn, this individual's hot and you're attracted to them, maybe find a different psychiatrist. Just a thought, but not victim shaming. How did you know, right? You were just like, he's cute, but you didn't know what was about to happen, right? Um, she said that he was really nice and he respected her, and she really wanted to not be on stimulants, which is girl same. And he got her all set up, listened to set her up, and she was good to go. She said that he was really funny and he would crack jokes, and he was really impressive with all of his achievements, and she was really impressed by all the things that he did and the way he held himself, and he said that she said he was equally impressed by the things that she did. And in their third meeting, she had asked if she could call him by his first name, and he said yes, which to me, again, I think is another red flag in that moment. I think maybe it should be that those boundaries remain the same, or sorry, the professional, where it's like doctor, because the minute you start using first name basis, that could very much blur the lines in an already, what feels like she thinks are blurred lines, right? She always alludes about how like kind he was and how warm he was, and he just listened to her, and it's like, girly pop, I'm so sorry. I think that's his job. Like, I'm not saying that maybe he wouldn't care, but at the same time, like, you are paying him to listen, and he's got to listen to you to be able to support you and make sure your meds are right, and he's doing those right things, right? Like, maybe I know that It sucks that maybe you didn't get that much in real life and that nice kindness, but I don't think these are boundary crossing. I think this is very typical stuff. However, I've never been to a psychiatrist or a therapist really, maybe once or twice in my life, not enough to recall how things go. So maybe not. Maybe it's supposed to be very clinical and not have conversations about how you're feeling and how you're thinking, even though it's a mental health person. Um, I don't know, just my thoughts. But again, in the third meeting asking, and he said yes, which I think, a lot of people are criticizing her, but I think we have to, no, I'm not criticizing him because I'm sure he was just trying to get close to the patient, but I think this is another takeaway in this situation where people could go, maybe we don't blur those lines. Like regardless, like if we know that transference can happen and patients can fall for their professional, like their therapists or whatever, maybe we just always make sure we hold those lines. So I do think that there's some situations as we go through this where it's like, okay, I could see like if he was cognizant of her having feelings, maybe we should have been extra careful on those boundaries. But I don't know. You guys, I wasn't there, you guys. And this is just what I'm watching from her side of the story. Man can't speak for himself because of HIPAA laws, from my understanding, is he's not going to be able to defend himself or say anything or like he exists. But did this whole story happen? Like, I'm not saying it's not, but we won't know because she's just recounting and there's really no evidence besides her typing up some emails and showing that, right? So that's what makes this story so difficult. Again, I'm not saying it's not, it's just we can only guess. This is only guess, this is only hypothetical. I was not there. But I do think for going forward, maybe patients and doctors don't blur that line unless you're friends in real life. I think that's a fair one to say. Just keep it that way so it's always clear mentally that it is a professional relationship. So I think that was a line that maybe should have been broken in hindsight, but again, at the time, you're probably not thinking that. As a client, you're just thinking, "I want to get to know this person more and keep it comfortable." And as the or the psychiatrist, you're probably thinking, "I'm just trying to, have a personal connection with, not personal connection, but more humane connection with this individual, and you want to respect your client." So I get it on both sides, but watching stuff like this maybe might be a cause for concern. Um, so and I had notes here that I said, I believe like he was doing certain things like small talk and listening intently as his job. And like there was one thing where she would comment that he wouldn't say anything, but he would nod his head. And I just kind of want to shed some light on that a little bit because I'm a person that does that a lot. If you ever watch my podcast, you can watch me constantly like nodding my head, and it's not necessarily that I'm in agreement with you or what the person is saying. It's almost like I'm clocking the information. Like I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I got that. Yeah, I got that." And then you'll see, and I know this because I watch myself when I edit. I will notice that when maybe I'm not quite fully understanding, I'll kind of like tilt my head and like, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden I'll nod my head again. And it's not necessarily an agreement. So I do have to wonder if while she was going through this whole story and she's saying these things when he's nodding his head, is he actually like verifying like, yes, that's correct to these things that she's saying, or is he just like clocking it and that's just something that he does? I imagine with any sort of therapist or psychologist or anything like that, when you're listening, like you listen a lot more probably than you talk. So I imagine you're going to be using nonverbal cues to advise the person you're communicating with that you're understanding what they're saying. That's kind of where I go with it. But again, wasn't there, just a thought. Like no answer doesn't mean that it's agreement with you. It could just be like maybe he doesn't want to encourage that conversation because it would foster the transference and make it more confusing. Maybe he's just letting you get it out and then you move on to another thing. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist, but just because he didn't agree with it or discredit you or got upset with you, maybe there's something in their training where they have to be very delicate on how they deal with that. And maybe it's kind of just like skirting around it and focusing on what matters to actually support you is what they should be doing. I don't know. Or maybe he was full blown in love with you. We don't know. He can't share the story. He never, in this whole entire thing, I believe, said that or inferred that. So I don't know. I'm just going off of this story. But anyways, she said that he just loved the attention when she would like give him compliments. She did claim that she told them several times that she had a crush on him or that he really appreciated her. And like again, I don't know, we weren't there. And was it specifically like I have a crush on you or like, like was it keeking it up and just being like, "Oh, I appreciate you so much." Cuz I'm a super grateful person, so I definitely tell people in my entire life that I appreciate them and I care about them or I hope that they're being in a good mood. Like I'm just a very loving, caring person, so I think people around me know that. And then there's just some people that aren't like that. That's totally okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's there could be different scenarios. That's all I'm saying. It's not necessarily grooming or using his education to manipulate you. I'm not, maybe it was, but myself and a lot of people are struggling to see that. And again, it's not discrediting you. Like, I totally get it being wrapped up in shit and not seeing it until you come outside and you're like, oh shit, I totally misunderstood that. That was, but you doubled down and you put it on TikTok. Okay, so that makes it a little bit harder for people not to comment. But anyways, carry on. So she said in the first 6 sessions, he would ask, he'd be super clinical and ask like medical questions, and then he just like stopped. And wouldn't ask about them anymore. And I half wonder is like, okay, after 6 sessions, that would be 6 months if you're going to see him once a month. Maybe at that point you had been on your medication, which from my understanding, she was on Vyvanse. Um, and maybe those stopped because there was no cause for concerns. Maybe after 6 months, if you've got nothing concerning clinically, they stop asking. Is that in the realm of possibility? But then in one circumstance, you'd say he would be clinical and then he'd let you in. But here you were saying, like, no, he was done. He was done asking clinical questions. Maybe because after 6 months, he doesn't have to ask unless you bring it up. Because maybe after 6 months of you being on the same medication, perhaps from their understanding, you're good unless you're going to bring it up so they don't have to. I don't know. I'm just saying. Maybe he was in love with you and wanted to get past that. I'm not sure. He didn't say that at this point. So assuming make an ass of you and me. So I don't know, that dumb saying. But she did, like I said, she did claim that she did tell him all the time that she like appreciated him. She had a crush on him. So like, again, if that is true, and he didn't slowly work, unless there's another reason, slowly work to maybe transfer her somewhere else, like that's a valid maybe criticism. Again, I didn't go to school for that, so how would I know? Maybe they're not supposed to. I did read that some people were saying that they're not supposed to just move that individual over because then that's like form of abandonment. If you have daddy issues and abandonment issues, maybe there's a good chance that that would be too much. But equally so, if she's outwardly, again, I wasn't there, pouring her love to you, maybe that is something that is a concern and maybe we should have walked away from this. I don't know. So at the same time, she also said that she has a therapist, and she also claimed that her therapist was obsessed with her. And she frequently would say that these individuals would get supply for their sick fantasies or for just like their own reasons. It wasn't that they were caring practitioners, it was that they were getting a supply because she was telling her therapist that she was in love with her psychiatrist, but the therapist wasn't doing anything, wasn't stopping it. There seems to be a lot in this conversation, and this how it was presented was like nobody stopped me from doing this, and I just can't be responsible for stopping myself. And I guess that's where I wanted to also like one of the things I wanted to talk about on this episode is like one thing I feel like I notice a lot these days, and I don't know if that's like social media era, microwave era, I don't know, but it seems like people just refuse to have personal responsibility for stuff. It's just like, well, I was telling these people this and I was conscious of this, but no one was stopping me and no one gave me the tools. And I just get curious, at what point is it your responsibility? I understand you're paying for these professionals and all that, but you're paying these professionals, at least a psychiatrist, for your ADHD medication. So if you're just coming once a month and he can kind of court that and that's all it is, get your medication, make sure you're good, doesn't hurt you, and then moves you on your way to the next month. I don't know. Is that, like at what point are you like, I'm too obsessed, this is unhealthy, I'm going to step away? I'm just curious, right? Like, and I get it. It sounds like you were sober. So obviously you've had in the past addiction. So I can understand you're addicted to this person. It's very hard. I'm not saying that. But you did display behaviors and abilities to become sober. And so it would have been really, really cool if you were able to use those tools to apply to your addiction. You full blown said you're addicted to this psychiatrist. So, there was tools in the past for sobriety and all of that, and those are the moments that maybe those individuals could have said, hey, the therapist maybe could have said, hey, you have these tools from being addicted in the past, why don't you try apply them to this person, and firstly stop seeing him. Sure, the therapist could have said that. Again, we weren't there. Again, we don't even know if these people are real because they can't even speak out for themselves, right? So like if this is true, yeah, I do think the therapist is kind of shitty to not have been like, hey, here's some tools to walk away from this person. This is obviously not good. You should go find someone else, because truly, if you're just going to a psychiatrist to get your medication and you haven't built necessarily, like with the therapist, years of like conversation, like why not do that? So, but again, we don't even know if this individual, like these things happen, because only one person can share their story. There's been a lot of criticisms online that, she's just doing this to make money because she's selling a book and she's an ADHD coach and she also does like human design and all that kind of stuff. So she also has a small business. So some people are saying she was just doing this to get views and these people don't even exist. Again, I don't know. This is just all in the realm of the possibilities, right? But a lot through the time she would just continually say like it was hot and cold, like one minute he'd let me in and the next minute he'd slam me down. And I think, girl, like he was, in my opinion, and I just think that there's a good possibility too that he was trying to just be a person and a human being and not always clinical, but maybe you then pushed a boundary so then he had to slam back and be cold again because you were just weren't getting it. But in the one minute you're saying he's always feeding this sick fantasy where you would just come to him and need him and he would get that out of you, but then he didn't want a real relationship. And it's just like it's rather confusing. And I think for sure, without a doubt, even if he did have feelings, like you were very confused as well. So I could see even if he did, which a lot of people are believing that he didn't, um, that's asking him to bring into this chaos, right? And so I don't know, there's a lot of contradictions, right? But she said that, he manipulated her with his education on, addiction and trauma bonding and all that kind of stuff. And he would use that to get his sick supply from her, which I still don't quite understand. So in January 2024, she was hit by a car and decided not to go for a follow-up treatment, but instead went to her psychiatrist appointment. And so I guess she got hit. She went and got looked at, and then so she had to go to primary care and booked it the next day. But because, or sorry, she went to primary care. I don't know how it works in the States. She went one place and they said, oh, you got to go somewhere else. So she was going to go somewhere else, but she had an appointment with her psychiatrist and she didn't want to miss it. So she went to the appointment and in that appointment told the psychiatrist that she had gotten hurt and was like internally bleeding or some shit. And he didn't tell her to go to the hospital. And again, I find that just so hard to believe. And I'm not saying it's not, because I have been abused by a medical professional before and it's not great. But I didn't go to TikTok to do a whole series on it, for one, because that's mortifying in my personal opinion. I'm not saying people shouldn't do that. Heal how you need to heal, babe. I'm just saying, like, I would not do that. But at the same time, like, at what point? At at what point here? Like, did this happen? I don't know. Like, and were you joking around? Like, oh, I got hit by it and I just got it. Like, I don't know. We weren't there. So I struggle. But at the same time, I also struggle with this story because I have personal experience, right? So I think two truths can exist at the same time. He could have been not done the best in certain circumstances if she was telling him this, and she might be completely thinking that she was given mad signals and they weren't there. Like she could say, "Well, I tell him I gave a crush on him and I love him," but like maybe she didn't say it in that way, or maybe it was like too joking. Like I don't know, but this is where I'm so torn on this story. But anyways, um, she said that she then spent the rest of the session just pouring her love for him, and that's what most of these sessions were, like her just pouring her love to him once a month and all of that, and he just did nothing to stop it, and it was like 3 years of this. She also said that she had a very close friend that was a medical professional that said, yeah, you know what, Kendra, I believe that like once you guys aren't patient and a doctor, that you'll be together. Like he obviously has feelings. And she said that she would tell him things like that, like, oh, my best friend thinks this. And again, he wouldn't say anything. He would just nod, da 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 da. Um, and then there's another part of the story I found interesting. She said that he claimed that she hid part of her diagnosis from her about her trauma and then used it against her. Again, it's just like, how do you know that? Like, these are just without him saying stuff and just nodding and seeing you once a month. It just I mean this in the kindest way, but the delusion got to the point where she was going to switch religions because she assumed that they were just that like they could be married after this. Like she truly believed like once they stopped being in this patient professional relationship that they were going to be together. And again, going through all of this, there's not really there's not really anything sticking out that's screaming anything other than just being a doctor and just trying to be there for your client. They're to me, from what I've seen, again, maybe we don't know, but at part 9, she says the story starts to get juicy, but then she also starts dropping her coaching business. So a lot of critiques in the DMs were saying like, "Oh, how convenient. You're dropping these things like you're just doing this to get clout, da 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 da," which I don't know, just saying what other people were saying. Um and then she continually says that he's, like, turning up the heat, but then she never, like, specifically says in her lives especially, um, what that heat is. So I'm confused what the heat is, babe. Um, she said that she was writing emails to him and he stopped replying, but then would bring them to their sessions, and so it's like she said that he very much always did stuff in session where it wasn't on paper and all that kinda stuff, and that was how sneaky he was and all those kind of things. And she also said in October 2024, she finds out that he takes in-person sessions. Keep in mind all these sessions were over Zoom. For all of these years, it was over Zoom, right? So I think it was 2021 because she had said 3 years, and I think this kind of ended in like beginning of 2025. So in October 2024, she finds out that he takes in-person sessions. She got super excited to see him in real life. Um, she confronted him about that and was like, "Why didn't you tell me that you take in-person sessions?" And he was like, "Oh, I just didn't think you'd want to go." And she's like, "What are you talking about? I'm obsessed with you. Of course I want to come to in-person sessions." And we don't we don't maybe see why. Right? Like maybe this was his way of keeping it professional. Just go online, just nodding, whatever. Like there's not even personal tension there. You know what I'm saying? So then she says that she tells her therapist about this, and her therapist is saying, "Well, I think that allegedly that he didn't want you there because he didn't want the sexual tension." So she's always saying that her therapist was like almost confirming this relationship with him. And she said that her therapist really, really pushed her to believe that he was into her. And she also claimed that her therapist was like super inappropriate, crossed all the boundaries, was always trying to get a supply from her. But again, we don't know. We are only hearing one side of the story. Could be true, could be not. In December 2024, she finally got into a personal session with him. She dressed right up, did her makeup, wore a fancy dress. Obviously, she wants to look good for him. And when she finally seen him, she went to go hug him and she was like, "I can't believe it. He just gave me a little pat, but I'm glad he set the boundary, but because, this is how it needs to be." But then she's mad at him for setting these boundaries and saying that he's manipulating her. It's like, kindly, in the moments that he's taking advantage of this, he's setting boundaries so that you don't go past that. You know what I'm saying? Not because I don't think it's because he was in love with you. I think he's trying to stop you from diving deeper into the transference into the feelings that you had. You just weren't picking it up, I think is what it comes down to. She said that they never crossed that line. So I'm just not sure again where the idea came from that he was into you if all these signals and all these things that you're putting out there and he's just not taking them because he was nice to you, because he listened, because he shared stuff with you and he let you in by sharing personal details. That's just getting to know someone after 3 years. Fuck, I tell people at work intimate stuff, friends at work, like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you just develop a relationship. That doesn't mean it's a sexual relationship, but maybe it was. Again, I'm not getting into that. So, anyways, enter Chat GPT. Good fucking Lord. You guys, this is so deep and I'm already like half an hour into it. I don't know. I might have to do a part 2 on this one because it really just does. My notes are still so long on this, but I'm going to try and get through this a little bit more. So enter Chat GPT. So she fed Chat GPT all the information from her side. She even named this AI, sorry, Henry, and she went off about the psychiatrist, told him everything. She was thinking about the situation, told him she was obsessed, and she said that even her chat was like, "Whoa, this is a little bit crazy. Like, this is a little bit much." And he wasn't gonna help her delusions, which I don't know, guys. Sounds to me like a lot of these chat GBTs are like designed to keep you in and engaged and to tell you what you want to hear. So just be careful with that. But that's where things kind of got a little bit, I think, where things broke off, where she was talking to this chat GPT about everything and creating this narrative and talking to him like another psychiatrist, essentially, or another therapist, because her therapist was being useless, allegedly. So she was then just bringing all this stuff to her psychiatrist. And it was just like feeding into this, like, narrative that like, yes, he is. So now it went from this therapist confirming to Henry confirming this, and then people in her chat, like people that are egging her on too. That didn't really help. She said that people are criticizing her for not taking accountability, and she was like, no, I am taking accountability. Like I do have these feelings. He's the one not taking accountability for his actions, and there's two people in this relationship, and it's like, no, I think you're in this relationship by yourself. Kindly. At the end of December, during a session, she mentioned how they had a special relationship, and he literally put up another boundary and said, no, we do not. We have a professional relationship. Again, putting up another boundary that no, we have a professional one. And she's still saying this, that he just didn't want to admit it. He didn't want to admit it. He didn't want to carry that. She also doxed him, by the way, several times, said his name. You can find it online, unfortunately. And now there's threads everywhere. And now she's upset about it. And it's like, girl, you said it. You should have. And she said, well, it's not my fault. By the time I took it down or went to go take it down, all these like carbon copies were been made. Like I have found his name several times now, not even trying. And it's like, that's what the internet does. And that's where I wanted to say, like, coming on here and sharing your opinion and your story, people know your location. It's really not going to be hard for them to find out, guys. Like, it's really not. And the fact that you did that, that's where I'm saying it could have been left in the draft. You could have talked to your friends about it. You could have even recounted the story without giving any information. You could have even said that this was somewhere where I was living. Like you could have delivered the story in a way that actually protected this man, but you didn't. And that's the part that I really struggle with. You know, it's like you're being mad at people for doxing, but you started it and you should know. You should know. You said that you come to TikTok for things like this and you didn't find this content. So you were making it so that it was out there and you wanted to share your story. Like, you know how TikTok works then. So you should have known that this was going to happen. This is the part I struggle with a lot. She also, like I said, she originally said that she came to TikTok to find therapy abuse or practitioners that abuse. And again, that does happen. We can't discredit that. Whether that's in this situation, we don't know. But that does happen. I'm also unfortunately a victim of that. I'm aware of that. But I don't, the first thing I didn't think was going to TikTok and making a series about it. And if I like, that is one reason why I've never shared it on the podcast, because people will know who it is. And I'm just past that in my life, right? Like, you got to have some understanding when you put information out there where it's going to go. Um, so right after this, she went to Henry about him setting this boundary, and Henry said it's a very common thing called transference. So that's where she learned about transference. She then told the psychiatrist about this conversation and was like, "Oh, well, Henry told me about transference, so no wonder why I have feelings for you." Blah blah blah. And she says that he immediately flipped and was like, "Well, have you been told about counter transference?" Um, and she's like, "No, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh, well, that's the flip side. So you should know that for your clients." So immediately that means to her that he has countertransference, and that is him validating his feelings. I think that's him warning you that you obviously can't find the boundaries properly between professional and clients, which you've proven. You've dated other psychiatrists and therapists. You've also like had this apparently psychotherapist, and you have clients yourself. Could also be that he was just warning you because you seem to have issues pushing boundaries in a professional setting. Is that a possibility? I guess not. She said that she thinks that he purposely kept the word transference away from her so that she couldn't figure out what was going on, because he obviously knew and he was using all this to manipulate her. And then So then I guess after that, she went back and talked to Henry about what countertransference was, and then screenshot it and sent it to her therapist. But every single time, like, he brings up this stuff and she tries to get close to him about him, she slams him down and sets a boundary. Yes, girl, that's what people do. One of the last things that I kind of want to talk about, and then I was go to a couple comments, and you guys let me know if you want to follow up on the story. But the next kind of phase she goes into, where she talks about how she was going through the luteal phase, I think is what she said, or she was ovulating. That's what it was. I think she was. I was ovulating, and I had a sex dream about him in his office, and I was so happy during it, and it was like the best feeling ever. And then I woke up and I was like, oh my God, thank God that's a dream. But I was felt very left out and very sad and very alone and lost and whatnot. She then wants to tell him about that. Like, at what point are you disrespecting your psychiatrist? And what point are you going to be an adult and say, I'm being inappropriate to this person? I'm just so tired of people not having personal accountability and responsibility for this stuff. Like, you could have said no. You could have stopped. Do you ever think that maybe you were using him for a sick supply? I don't know, just a thought. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just so anyway, she went and told him that, and he was obviously uncomfortable. Like, obviously uncomfortable, but she says that's because he that was the best thing, and she'd give him all this content, and he could just go home and have his sixth fantasy filled with being needed but not being in a like I truly think you guys should go watch this series. I think you should go on YouTube and find the videos itself and you get the like you go look and please come back and tell me, is there something, is there a place where you think he did again, now I think there's places that maybe if he did know she had a crush, he could have shut that down and moved to push that, but again, Zoom meetings for 3 years, once a month, we talk about your medication, we listen to you, I leave. It's not like they're hanging out every single day. It's not, you know what I mean? So it's like, and maybe she didn't say it in the right way. So maybe he was oblivious. I'm not entirely sure. But she does say that she's getting a lot of critics and a lot of people. So she stopped stitching and all that. So she would go on live. This is all on TikTok. You guys can go find it. Go look for yourself. I truly think you guys should dive deeper into this. But what kind of rounded up is it sounds like she quit her job and that changed insurance, and insurance didn't have mental health coverage, so she wasn't able to see him anymore, and she wasn't going to be paying just under $200 a month to um, go through this torture. So she kind of ended it, and then when she ended it, she had this huge monologue, and he just it was again, it's just super awkward to watch this because it's clear that he is not comfortable with the way that she's being, and she's just taking it as because he's in love with her, and I personally don't see that. And I think at the end, he kind of blew up a little bit from what I understand of being like, what are you talking about? Like, where have I ever done this? And she was just like, you just don't get it. And they obviously are on different wavelengths. Um, but it sounds like it's a 25-part series. And from what I've seen is she's not seeing him anymore. And that's when, 6 months later, August roughly, she decided to come online because she'd still been thinking about it and wanted to get help from TikTok because it's been such a huge resource. And then she said she posted it and she got a lot of people saying that they've had the same thing and validating her, but she's also had a lot of critics. She's also said that she's had medical professionals also like validate what she was saying, but because the commenters are so brutal, they just delete all of their comments. So, I don't know what's true and what's not true, but I thought I could end off with just what are some comments that people are saying under this whole series. Um, Quote unquote, he used his boundaries as a shield. That's literally what boundaries are. If my psychiatrist was good at anything, it was being professional and acting professional. The lady claiming that her psychiatrist made her addicted to him. A couple weeks ago, during a full moon, I was ovulating. This is how I'm going to randomly start sentences from now on. That's where she was talking about the sex stream. The Kendra effect will be taught in modern psychology forever. He's very good at pretending to listen, and then 5 seconds later, he listens to me so well. He's such a good listener because he's a Pisces. He knew his professional standard like the back of his hand. He's supposed to. Henry, ChatGPT, at this point was being very protective. He wasn't going to feed my delusions. LOL, oh my God. Rescheduling an ER visit to see your psychiatrist is crazy. I'm 8 minutes in. I can see that she is the problem here. Like, again, guys, you got to go follow this and look at the comments. It's actually quite interesting. I always find the comment sections are sometimes the most interesting because you're just like, am I being a bitch? Am I being crazy? Like, this seems crazy. And like, she came on and said she wasn't having a psychotic break. She wasn't going through psychosis. But I did want to also mention too, there was a lot of like, she constantly feeds and talks to her AI, like ChatGPT and all that kind of stuff to the point where they call her Oracle. And, I'm not saying she's going through AI psychosis, but I do want to say like, we got to be really careful when we're using these things. I think it's a great tool for research and all that kind of stuff, but using these tools as psychiatrists might not be the best thing to do in my opinion. I think that perhaps you could build yourself an echo chamber, and I also don't think we should come to TikTok as our psychiatrist as well, because unfortunately or fortunately it's very easy to build yourself an algorithm, and some people just they're in it for the tea, man, they're in it for the entertainment, they're actually not in it for your well-being, and they do stoke the fire, and there's bot farms, there's all of those things. So I think we got to be really careful when this shit happens. But wow, you guys, the Kendra effect for sure. Now that's two Kendras in a row. I'm not going to bring a third one next week. That was it for this. I really didn't think I was going to be this long on this episode, but like I said, I really think you guys should go watch the compilations from start to finish and come back here and tell me what you think, because I know I missed a fuck ton and maybe I misinterpreted some things. I don't know, but I just thought like there's some warning signs here as a psychiatrist or a medical professional, what people can do now with the virality of TikToks and all that kind of stuff, because people want to see tea and drama. is this true? Is there a caution of being like, be careful what you're saying online because you could be really harming these people? He's been doxxed. Like, what does that mean? And also at the same time, are we in trouble when we have echo chambers validating and then we're just ignoring and blocking everyone that says, no, girl, this is crazy? Not saying that we should say crazy, but we should be like, no, I don't think that's happening. At the same time, it's not fair to bring a story like this to this level, like this detail, with a man that can't defend himself. I think that's really, really sad. And I don't think that should have happened. But I mean, it's all over TikTok and social media. So why not just add my crazy, unhinged opinion? But let me know what you guys think if you stuck around this long. Thank you so much for listening and being here. As I always mention, on Mondays, we have Keeping Up with Canada. If you want to learn about some stuff that happens weekly in Canada, you can go on YouTube on Mondays. Wednesdays, Internet Insanity. Thursday, because I was a little bit late this week. And then Fridays, a podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Rumble, the Be Real Babe podcast. Thank you guys again so much. And until next time, guys, bye. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Until next time, bye.